a lot of questions. So to start, what comes to mind when you see this logo?
Chicken sandwich.
Chicken sandwiches, what'd you say? Chicken, what else? What do you think about that company?
Christian.
Oh,
Christian?
chicken base.
Closed
Yes.
on Sunday.
Closed on Sunday?
Good kids play place.
Good Kids Play Place?
It's always their pleasure.
It's always their pleasure. Yes, what'd you say?
Good service.
Good service, yeah. What about this?
Expensive.
Happy, you said what?
Expensive.
Expensive,
Yes.
yeah. Like elite,
Strong coffee.
strong coffee, caffeinated. What about this?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea.
Ice.
Yes.
A safe place.
Good menu, safe place.
Safe place.
They're a well-run business.
Well-run business,
Convenient.
convenient,
Very nice employees.
very nice employees. I think of the fact that they always greet you when you come in.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about this?
French
French fries, what did you say?
Kids place.
This place,
Drive-through.
drive-through,
Good French fries.
good French fries.
Dates in my car with my kids. We'll go get like a $3 basket of fries, just
Yeah.
me and one of them. And we'll just have 45 minutes or an hour and we'll just like watch TV, like a movie on my phone.
Yeah, yeah. So when you think of service from McDonald's compared to Chick-fil-A, do you think that they're equal?
Oh, no.
No? Why not?
Because it's Chick-fil-A and McDonald's.
I think they just hold their franchises to a higher standard, possibly.
Hold them to a higher standard. That's really good feedback. What about this?
Oh, my. Money.
Money.
Yeah.
Cost.
Like, yeah, a mandate.
Mandate long lines. Yeah, long wait times.
Always frustrating service.
Frustrating service.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good insight. Warren Buffett said that it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it.
Yes.
And if you think about that, you'll do things differently.
Oh.
Here we have our character, our reputation, and our brand. Our character is who you are, who you know you are, right? It's the way you think, you feel, or you behave. Your reputation is what other people think you are, right? It's your credibility. It's the general consensus about you. And then your brand is, if you have a business, it's what the consumer thinks about you, right? So just like you feel like Chick-fil-A holds their franchises to a higher standard, that's their brand, right? It's what we as a consumer thinks about them. So today we're going to be talking about leadership development. We're going to focus on KIP competency. Competency in the areas of communication, integrity, and professionalism. There's lots of other avenues to go down when we talk about leadership development and business development. But ultimately, I feel like if we are deficient in any of these three areas, none of the rest really matters, right? If you can't communicate well, you don't have good integrity, and you don't know how to be a professional, then the rest kind of falls apart. So we're going to focus on that, and hopefully in future sessions we can go into a deeper dive. With regards to integrity, what is integrity?
What you do when no one is looking.
What you do when no one is looking. Yeah. I'm going to watch a short video on integrity.
Integrity. Integrity, said author C.S. Lewis, is doing the right thing even when no one is looking. Integrity is a foundational moral virtue and the bedrock upon which good character is built. Acting with integrity means understanding, accepting, and choosing to live in accordance with one's principles, which will include honesty, fairness, and decency. A person of integrity will consistently demonstrate good character by being free of corruption and hypocrisy. Integrity is revealed when people act virtuously regardless of circumstance or consequences. This often requires moral courage. Indeed, integrity is the critical connection between ethics and moral action.
All right, so we all agreed? We feel like that's accurate? Yeah? All right. So let's move on to professionalism. What is professionalism and how do we demonstrate it? Anyone? What is professionalism and how do you demonstrate it?
Behavior.
Be the best that you can be, your behavior,
Treating people equal.
treating people equally,
Your attitude.
your attitude, Yeah, I like to say that professionalism is like the lines on the highway, right? It gives you your boundaries and it also lets other people know their boundaries. It gives them a roadmap into how to interact with you, right? So if your doctor comes in and he's very, he's dressed appropriately in scrubs, he's very to the T, he then dictates how you communicate with him going forward, right? You'll show up to your appointment on time, the questions you'll ask him may be different, how you interact with him will be different. He rolls in Hawaiian shirt and shorts, he's late to all his appointments, he talks about his wife and kids and his vacations. The way you interact with him may be different. The questions that you feel comfortable asking him may be different, right? So the way he presents himself sets the tone for how you then know that you can interact with him. There are 8 components of professionalism. I like to say professionalism, it is not it's not the job you do, it's how you do the job. So the 8 components of professionalism are integrity, which we just covered, and you'll find that these 3 areas, professionalism, integrity, and communication, will keep intermingling, right? Then we have emotional intelligence, which I'm actually going to circle back to in just a moment. Knowledge. This is making sure that you are staying up to date on all the things that are current in whatever you're saying that you are a professional in, right? So if you are a professional in agriculture, in childcare, in accounting, whatever that is, knowledge says that you stay up to date. You have the most current knowledge about the thing that you said that you're a professional in. Appropriateness is knowing what is appropriate in every situation. Competency is making sure that your abilities match the requirements of the thing that you are doing. Conscientiousness is attention to detail, right? And confidence is having a trust or a belief in your ability to do those things. Let's circle back to EQ. I deal with children, and so a lot of the things that we focus on, our parents have focused on up to this point, have been IQ, right? How can I make my child the smartest? How can I make them the most intelligent, make them the newest Einstein? And really what studies have found is that your emotional intelligence has a greater predictor of your outcome and success in life than your actual intellect, right? What is your emotional intelligence? It's your ability to recognize, understand, and manage your feelings, and then to then move forward and understand the feelings of others, right? So EQ works from the inside out. As a result of your ability to recognize, understand, and manage your feelings, you as an emotionally intelligent person can accurately interpret the feelings of others and then know exactly how to react to them in the most appropriate way. You will find that Fortune 500 companies now are assessing EQ as an indicator of work performance, right? So over Fortune 500 companies revealed that salespeople with the highest EQ outperformed the others by 50%. At PepsiCo, employees who were identified as emotionally intelligent had 10% more productivity, and at L'Oreal, sales professionals who were hired based on their EQ outperformed their peers by over $90,000 at the end of the first year. EQ is a greater indicator of your long-term success than your IQ, and the great thing about EQ is that you can grow it over time, right?
That's true.
So the core components of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, which is your ability to recognize and understand yourself, your moods, and your personhood. Next is self-regulation, which is the ability to control those things and to control your impulses. Then you have motivation, and we're not talking about extrinsic motivation, which is how you're motivated outwardly, right? I say you show up to the session, you get $50. That's extrinsic motivation. That's an external motivator. We're talking about intrinsic motivation, that if no one gave you anything, the thing that makes you feel good about doing something is your internal motivator, right? You worked the food pantry, you got that warm and fuzzy feeling, helping people in the line. That's an intrinsic motivator, right? An internal motivator. Then you have social skills. This is the ability to manage relationships. And then there's empathy. Empathy is the ability to recognize the emotions of others. Empathy is so very important because a lack of professional empathy will handicap you in business, right? You find individuals for whom they are able to do business well, they're hitting on all cylinders, but they are not able to read a room. They don't know when someone is having maybe a hard day. They're about to give critical feedback and they just bulldoze through it because they didn't see that person looks like they're struggling. That's a lack of professional empathy. And a lack of professional empathy over time will affect your brand, your reputation, and ultimately your character, right?
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you go back to the pyramid slide really fast?
Which one?
Pyramid.
The pyramid,
Yes.
it's the pyramid.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. We're gonna watch a video on the importance of empathy.
The importance of empathy. We all live in our own version of reality. A reality that is limited by our senses, our temperament, and our own experiences. It is the only reality we will ever truly know. But it is crucial to our personal development, our relationships, and to society itself that we make the effort to try and experience other people's realities as well. This is done through empathy. Simply stated, empathy is an active attempt to understand another person's perspective, their emotions, and in essence, their reality. We are social animals, and our ability to communicate and understand each other's emotional states is key to maintaining our relationships. So it is little wonder that the ability to empathize is hardwired directly into our brains. One area that assists in this process is the right supramarginal gyrus, which helps us to distinguish our own emotional state from that of another person, and plays a key role in our ability to observe and assess what other people are experiencing. Studies from Neuron Science Journal suggest that we have systems of mirror neurons in our brains that cause us to mimic the actions of others. That is why when we see someone yawn, we will often yawn in reply. And when we observe someone experiencing joy or pain, we experience the same sensation to a certain extent. But these reactions are primarily driven by subconscious reflexes. In order to be truly empathic, you have to actively think beyond yourself and your own concerns. You can develop this empathic skill by practicing some simple habits. Be observant of others. We tend to spend the majority of our day dwelling on ourselves, caught up in our own daily routines and digital distractions. But taking the time to observe others around you is a good first step in developing your empathy. Watch and wonder. Try to focus on the person's state of being rather than categorizing or labeling them. Ask yourself, what kind of day are they having? How are they feeling? Challenge yourself to genuinely care about their well-being. Curiosity about others is the first step to expanding your empathy. Use active listening. During a conversation, especially a heated one, most people formulate the response before the other person even finishes their statement. This form of communication is more verbal combat than an exchange of ideas or opinions. Avoid this reflex by slowing down. Rather than rushing to reply, take a moment to consider the other person's statement. Ask follow-up questions to better understand what the speaker intended. Try to understand their emotional state and the deeper motivations behind their statement. What life experiences led them to their current worldview? Remember, you don't need to share someone's opinion in order to understand it and acknowledge it. And listening will help inform and expand your own opinion. Open up. Learning more about other people's experiences is a key element to seeing the world through someone else's eyes. But it is also important to open up about your own feelings and experiences. Empathy is a two-way street that at best is built upon mutual understanding. Through a combination of uncovering the deeper motivations of someone else's position and expressing our own underlying concerns, we often discover a shared commonality, even with those who hold different beliefs than ours. Through the practice of keeping an open mind, empathy helps us challenge prejudice, find commonality, and expand our moral universe. Without it, we are apt to label people outside our circle as the other, the problem, or the enemy. These labels draw lines in the sand that prevent us from moving forward or growing. It cuts us off from the realization that the human experience is a shared experience. We have much more in common than we think, and are really just seeing small variations of the same reality.
All right. Do you find that to be true?
Yes.
Yeah. So ways to increase your emotional intelligence. You should reduce your stress. When you're stressful, you're on high alert. I don't know if any of you have studied your brain, but the frontal cortex of your brain up here is where your reason and your logic lies, right? That's why when it says that someone has flipped their lid, it means that part of their brain has gone offline, right? And instead, they are reacting from their hippocampus, which is at the back of your brain. This is your survival instincts. This is your fight, flight, or freeze instincts. This is the part of you that is always reading a person to say, are they going to kill me? Am I about to die? Is this a harmful situation? Dealing with everybody from that part of the brain is a very aggressive way to deal with individuals, right? And so reducing your stress allows the reasonable portion of your brain to stay online so that you can deal with people calmly and with reason and logic. So reduce your stress. Maintain emotional awareness. It's very important that you know and recognize your own emotions. And one of the worst things we can do is lie to ourselves. right? So being able to recognize I am feeling upset about this, or I'm feeling anxious about this, or this is starting to bother me, and taking a moment to step back and be like, why is that happening? Is it a lack of planning? Is it because I didn't plan for this moment and now I feel overwhelmed? Did I not do my homework on this? Do I feel overwhelmed because they are talking too aggressively? Are they too close? I have individuals, I'm like that. When COVID happened, I was all about that 50 feet. Like, I'm totally down with everybody giving me 6 feet. It's like my best life, right? And so when people come to me, I was at a conference and this gentleman was talking to me about a session I did, and he was so close. And so when he was talking, I just stepped back and I was like, yeah. And every time I stepped back, he stepped forward. Right? So I did it twice, and finally I was like, I feel like we're not reading one another. I said, because I'm stepping back and you continue to step forward. I said, I'd really appreciate if you would just stay where you are so that I can hear what you're saying instead of being so sidetracked by what you're doing. Right? Having that language to know when something is throwing you off instead of just enduring it, because that causes stress. Right? So being aware of your emotions. Approach them with curiosity. When you feel an emotion, don't just bury it. Ask yourself why that is happening. What's the real reason that I'm feeling this? Utilize assertiveness. When you never speak up for yourself, that's a very stressful situation, right? Because you feel like life is happening at you all the time, and so then you put all these things down and down and down, and then when you finally do speak up, you're aggressive. You're not assertive. And so using assertiveness is just speaking up. It's not speaking out all the time. It's not speaking on all the time. It's just speaking up, right? To say, well, I don't really prefer that. That's not my preference. I actually think I would prefer to push this back. For example, I had a person ask me for a meeting today that I do not feel like doing, right? I don't have the capacity to do it today. If I wanted to people please them and make them very, very happy, I would have pushed myself and I would have done this meeting. But as I was even writing the email, all the stress of trying to fit this into this day came up, and I was like, I just cannot do this today. And so I said, hey, I can do this next week. I can avail myself to any time you need next week, but it will need to be next week, right? And so being assertive, saying what you need and providing solutions will help you. Respond, don't react, right? If you feel like you've gone offline, it's best that you step away so that you can respond instead of react. Increase your positivity. Think about the things that you're grateful for. Ask for feedback. Most of us say we want feedback, but we really don't. We really don't want feedback. But in order to be a good leader, you have to have feedback, because whatever you think you're doing for a person, they may not take it in the way that you're intending it. And if you can never receive that feedback to understand whether the way you intended it to go is the way that's being received, you can't grow as a leader. I was in a hospital last year, and there was a sign on the door that said, we judge other people by their actions, but we want other people to judge us by our intentions, right? And I find that to be very true, that oftentimes we're like, well, they knew what they were doing, but then when we do something, it's like, it's not what I meant. And so asking for feedback and being able to accept that is important. Using humor. Right, humor is wonderful. I'm naturally very sarcastic. I feel like I got it genetically, and so using humor to diffuse situations. Right, I had a gentleman asking me all about my business. At first, it was fine. At a certain point, it was very prying. Right, and so he's like, "Well, when did you start it? How much money do you make a year? What blah blah blah." And I said, man, do you want my blood type, my social security number, my IQ? I said, what else can I provide for you, right? And he started laughing, but you can use that to diffuse the situation. That's a better way for me to respond than to say back up and shut up, right? It's a better way to respond, so use humor. Resolve conflict, don't run away from conflict. We'll address this here in just a little bit. And then use empathy. Signs of low EQ, you want to know if you are not where you need to be, if you often feel misunderstood, if you're very easily upset, if you're become overwhelmed by your emotions often and you have a difficulty being assertive, that's a lane of growth for you, right? If you want to know if you have high EQ, you understand the link between your emotions and behavior, you remain calm most times during stressful situations, you handle difficult people with diplomacy, and you're able to influence others toward a common goal. So if you don't feel like you're hitting on all cylinders on there, rest assured, you can grow in this area, and we have the rest of our lives to increase in this capacity. Communication. I'm going to talk about some forms of communication before we dive into communication styles. With regards to email communication, it's very important that if you're doing business or you're a leader and you're telling people to contact you, that you check the form of contact that you told them to use, right? And so if you said email, then check your email regularly. It's nothing worse than someone telling you to do that and they check it like once a month, right? So check your email regularly. When you write emails, it's very important that you avoid irrelevant details. This is not the time to verbally vomit. Just state the details that you need, avoid the irrelevant ones. Avoid text talk. I actually see this quite often in this dispensation, where we write emails like we're texting, right? So there's no like greeting, it's not hello, it's just like, so what about blah, blah, blah. And it's like one sentence. And then you'll find that you get a whole bunch of emails with just like one sentence because they're writing an email like a text message. Let's not do that. An email is a more formal form of communication. If you were going to text, you probably should have just text. But an email, you should have a greeting, you should state the business, you should end it well. Proofread what you're doing, be respectful, communicate well, and remember your digital footprint. Emails live online forever. So whatever you put in them, they can be recalled, they can be shared. You want to remember that if you're getting froggy on email, that anybody can take those things, they can share those things, they can move them to different places. And then you want to avoid abstraction. Abstraction is something I learned about 5 years ago, and it really changed my point of view on a lot of things. Abstraction is the process of taking away or removing characteristics from something to reduce it to some set of essential characteristics. So we can do this with children, where we feel like they're just kids, right? And so we don't think about their different personalities or things. We just view them as small humans that need us for everything, right? So we reduce them down to a set of things that's easy for us to manage. There's a study called the Milgram study, and one of the reasons I like it is because it shows us that we are more capable of harming people that we cannot physically see, even if they communicate their distress with us.
Wow.
So we're going to watch a portion of this experience.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which foot?
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right ahead.
Let me out.
The experiment requires you to continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
ain't staying now. I'm not gonna kill us. I mean, who's gonna take responsibility for any accident? I'm responsible for any accident. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that father there. I'll get no answer. He was hollering on less voltage. Can't you check in to see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
My God. Wow.
65% of participants administered lethal doses that would have killed people. 65%. Even with hearing them scream, even with all this stuff, they did it because somebody told them to. We are quite capable of doing things that I think we would like to think that we aren't. And so while that may seem like a really extreme example, I like to use that in email because oftentimes we can get really, really aggressive online, in emails and text messages, saying things that we really wouldn't want to back to if we were face to face, and would not be how we would actually communicate if we were having one-on-one communication with someone. And we really want to make sure that we always remember who we're communicating with. That is a whole human that you're talking to, whether it's on the phone, whether it's over email, whether it's over text message, whether it's face to face. That is a human with people who care for them, with people who rely on them, with emotions, with experiences. And it's really important that you work to humanize the people that you communicate with and work strongly against anything that would attempt to make you abstract them, right? To view them as a set of characteristics, okay? Text communication. You want to start with proper English and start with the salutation. In my agency, I don't respond to anybody who doesn't say hello when they text me. Right? It's the middle of the day and they say, what time do you need me on Friday? I just respond back and say good morning. I won't say anything else until you say good morning back, because that's so very rude. If we were in person, I would not walk up to you and be like, hey, what did you need on? I wouldn't do that, right? I'd be like, hey there, hey, how you doing? And then I would say that. Text is the same way, right? And so you want to make sure that when you're communicating as a leader on behalf of a business or behalf of yourself, that you respond to people appropriately. So you start with the salutation, hello, good morning, Taco Tuesday, good evening, whatever. Then you want to state the business, just wondering if you still wanted to meet on Friday at 2 o'clock. And with a complimentary close, I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day, okay? Use your spell and grammar check. Refrain from using slang or acronyms and familiar language. This is really common in Oklahoma. Sis, hun, babe, doll, sweetie. All of those things are familiar language, and we like to use those because we think that it warms a conversation. It doesn't. It's very condescending, and I'll tell you why. Because it's familiar language, and unless you are familiar with someone, that means you have a relationship, a strong like or strong love of someone, you're not qualified to use familiar language. And so, using familiar language for someone who you do not have a familial relationship with does the opposite.
Right.
It infers incompetence.
Yes.
I call you sweetie because I don't think you're smart enough, right?
Or flirtatious.
Or flirtatious,
Yeah.
yes. And so it's very important that you watch how you do those things, right? Individuals do it all the time, and again, it's a way, sometimes it's a way for them to level up. So if they're in a service industry, they want to call you honey because they don't want to be a servant, right? So they want to be equitable with you, so they call you honey in order to, balance that out. But whatever we're doing, we have to be fully in that. If I'm serving you, whether it's as a nanny or a business owner, then I'm serving you, right? And if that means, hey, good morning, how can I help you? No, whatever you need, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't make me less than. It means I'm firmly walking in the role that I decided to walk in this moment.
Yes.
It doesn't detract from my personhood to serve you, right? But we want to refrain from using that, especially with someone who's paying you. I've had people fire people who they were paying because they called them sweetie. Hey, sweetie, just wondering when you were going to pay that invoice. I wouldn't do that. Next, let's talk about the components of good communication.
So what's the recipe for great communication? If we were going to think about our communication as a meal, what are the ingredients that we need to have present in the meal? How do we put together a great meal? Well, let's think about it this way. There are really 5 ingredients that have to be present all the time for great communication to be possible. All right, the first ingredient is clarity. How do you make your point clearly? It's got to be clear. The second ingredient is brevity. How do you get to the point quickly? How do you not waste people's time? The third ingredient is context. How do you help people see how your point or how your message fits in for them? How does it make sense for them? The fourth ingredient is impact. How do you make it stand out? How do you make it memorable? And the fifth ingredient is value, which is fairly self-explanatory. How do you make your message valuable for the people who are consuming it? 5 ingredients that will go into every communication meal: clarity, brevity, context, impact, and value. Okay, great. So we've got our ingredients. Now the next question is, how much of each ingredient do we need? And just like cooking a great meal, that's going to depend. Different meals are going to need different ingredients. They're going to need the ingredients in different proportions. And different audiences are going to have different palates. They're going to want different things out of their meal. So the really savvy communicator is going to look at their row of ingredients and is going to be able to determine, based on the audience that they're preparing their message for, what ingredients need to be dominant. So how do you figure it out? Well, when do we need clarity to be an important ingredient? Well, when there's a lot of complexity around the situation or around the issue, you need to make sure that your message includes plenty of clarity so people understand what this is really about. When do we need a bit of brevity? Well, when time is short, when we think attention spans are short, when your audience is going to be very, very senior, you want to make sure you have enough of the brevity ingredient. How about context? Well, maybe when there's unfamiliarity with the topic, or maybe when you're communicating with people that have a lot on their mind, or are walking in to listen to you, having just come from something very, very confusing, you probably want to make sure you use plenty of the ingredient context. How about impact? When do we need to have a lot of impact in our messaging? Well, when there's a lot of noise, when we really need to work hard to make it memorable, right? When we really want it to stand out, and we think that's going to be hard to achieve. We got to make sure we add plenty of impact. And then the fifth and final is value. And I think when there's skepticism, when there's choice, when there's competition, when a decision has to be made, and there are other choices that could be made, we have to work hard to make sure that there's plenty of value in the meal that we're creating. All 5 of these ingredients are going to be present in every meal that you create, in every communication that you put together. You always want to make sure that you have some clarity and some brevity and some context and some impact and some value. But depending upon who you're cooking for, depending on who you're preparing for, you're going to make choices of which of those ingredients needs to be most dominant. Think about your communication like you're preparing a meal for an audience and you want to impress them, you want them to have a great experience. And different audiences have different palates, which means you have to adjust the ratios of the ingredients depending upon the situation.
All right, so all communication should have these ingredients, right? Clarity, brevity, context, impact, and value. You want to kind of commit these to memory. Ensure that when you are reaching out to people, that you have these things. I think so many times I've watched great speakers or people with really great messages get lost with some of these. They had a really good message, but they weren't brief enough, right? So they're talking all around and you just get lost in it because they got emotional and they just really want to share this, but you lost them. They didn't have the impact because they didn't have enough brevity, right? Or the other. So it's really important that you realize what is your point, how can I get to it the quickest with the most impact and the most value. Let's talk about conflict. What is conflict?
There's no eye to eye.
Not seeing eye to eye? Mm-hmm.
Major difference.
A major difference.
Nothing gets resolved.
Nothing gets resolved.
Difference of opinion, thought, and action.
Difference of opinion, thought, and action, isn't it?
Two strong beliefs can't align together.
Two strong beliefs that can't align with each other.
That's beautiful.
How do you know when you're in conflict? So your energy can feel it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You feel it in your guts.
You feel
Anxiety,
it.
stress, your heart increases.
Mm-hmm.
You get anxious, you get angry, you get anxious, highly emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Frustration.
Frustration.
Loss of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Nausea. Loss of appetite.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it make you feel when you're in conflict?
Or just what she said, nauseated, loss of sleep, anxiousness,
Unproductive.
emotional.
Yeah.
Very
Unproductive.
unproductive.
I would like to put to you an opportunity to reframe conflict. That conflict is really just a communicated and unmet need.
Absolutely.
Okay? And if we look at it like that, if someone is communicating their unmet need, that shouldn't necessarily evoke in us anxiety,
Right.
depression, frustration, nausea, loss of sleep, right? Because, go ahead.
We will start to believe that all conflict is something bad.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And we really have to undo this notion, right? Conflict is just meeting something, right? You come into contact with that door, and then you decide to open the door and walk through it. You don't stand at the door and yell at it. You fuss with it and cry over it, right? You met it head on.
Right.
You open the door and you walk through it. That's what conflict is like. It's coming to something, meeting something, and then deciding the best way to get through it. Right? So if you reframe conflict as this person is expressing an unmet need. Now, you may or may not be able to meet that need. It may be a need of like they want you to see their point of view and you don't agree with their point of view. Maybe it's a need of they want X, Y, and Z, and that's not something you can meet, right? Yes, ma'am.
I'll say, to speak to that on the other side of the conflict, that's where communication will come in, and you're actually saying that I'm not able to help you with that.
That's right. Absolutely.
Or I see your point of view, it's valid from your point of view, I don't agree with that one.
Absolutely. So when you come up, and this is conflict, you will either be able to meet the need, and then there's resolution, conflict resolution, or you're not able to meet the need, and then there's conflict management, right? We just manage the situation as best we can, and this is where professional empathy comes into place, right? I see that this really bothers you. I can hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to do X, Y, and Z. What other solutions would work for you, right? And so because it's really important that we realize our emotions are not always the truth.
Right.
Right? Our emotions are a collaboration or a lifelong building of our experiences, right? Things that people have told to us, what we've seen from others, how we've seen other people manage or not manage their emotions properly. And many people have grown up not seeing people communicate through arguments or conflict, not seeing them do that. And so you're going through all these things feeling like this is a big green flag. And it may not be. And so that's where it goes back to EQ, examining your own emotions to say, is this the truth? Am I feeling anxious about this because this is actually a big deal, or am I feeling anxious about this because I don't feel qualified to communicate through it, right? And being able to address that. So there's a book called Radical Candor, and she put conflict and the addressing of conflict into these 4 quadrants, right? And so when you are going to, there's a conflict, so an unmet need, and you've decided I'm going to address this unmet need directly because I care a lot about this person, you are going to have compassionate or radical candor, right? This means that you talk to them, you communicate assertively, and the outcome of that is going to be growth and profound change. Because not only are you communicating through it, but you're still caring for them. You have professional empathy. If you care about somebody a lot and you care so much that you decide not to say anything, you're actually ruinous empathy. Ruinous empathy, which means that you don't have enough within you to handle these things. You let problems or mistakes go unaddressed to avoid hurt feelings or creating stress or pressure, and you give praise designed to make people feel good rather than push a person toward better or great work. I would like you to know it doesn't take long for people to realize that positive comments aren't helping them grow.
Right.
And so what happens is there's ignorance, and the long-term result is there will be no change in behavior. If you are silent and you actually don't care, you're like done with it, you've been done with it, you was done with it 7 weeks ago, then you have manipulative insincerity. This is when you care more about being liked and trying to gain advantage than you care about other people. This is dishonesty, and it never leads to a positive outcome, and in the long run, everyone will see through you. And it causes mistrust from everyone around you and no change in your environment. And then you have people who will challenge you directly, they will be assertive, but they still don't care, right? And that's obnoxious aggression. This is when you fail to care personally, but you do challenge directly. Obnoxious aggression can help achieve successful results, but in the long term, it's going to ruin relationships. Because criticism becomes a dangerous weapon instead of a path to improvement. But know this, it is the next best thing to compassionate candor, because most people would rather work for a competent jerk than an incompetent nice person.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What happens if you do all of the good things and you still don't see any change in the conflict?
Absolutely. That's where it goes into conflict management. You just have to say, it looks like we've been around this mountain. I don't think we're going to find a way through this, because it does take two individuals. A conflict is a meeting of two people, one of whom expressing an unmet need. You can also express an unmet need. I don't feel like you're giving. I'm attempting to give, and I'm expressing to you that I have an unmet need. It doesn't look like you're giving at all. And I don't think that we can find a way through it. We may have to shelve this. This may be something we'll just have to know that this is not something we're going to see eye to eye on. And that's where you just kind of have to release it. Yeah. Any questions on that?
She just made the comment, agree to disagree, but some people don't agree. They still try to, and then at that point, do you just distance yourself?
It depends. There are people for whom you have to work with. And if you have to work with and you are quote unquote agreeing to disagree, then that's where communicating firm boundaries is really important. Boundaries are for you, they're not for other people, right? Rules are for other people, boundaries are for you. So you say to yourself, this is not an area I'm engaging with you in. Right? I will not re-engage in this area because it's not worth my time and my energy. And so when they attempt to re-engage you by agreeing to disagree when they're not really agreeing, then you just say, it looks like we're heading down a road we've already been down. I'd hate for us to waste time on this, I'm really not. But if you think that we can have a different outcome, I'd be willing to have a conversation with you. And you just move on.
A lot of people also subconsciously use that I agree to disagree term to justify what got them ahead, and it's really not for everyone.
Right. Yeah. I also think people use that as a way to get out of a conversation.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's just like they say, I agree to disagree. And a lot of times if I see them in person, I'll be like, you don't look agreeable. You know, if we're agreeing to disagree, we should be in agreement. At the end of the day, we're still in agreement.
That's an agreement, yes.
You don't look like you're in agreement. So I don't really feel like this is true. Right? And so, yes,
at that point, you're probably at a point where you're not going to agree on anything.
No.
You're not. I don't even want to agree to disagree with you.
You're right.
For the sake of business.
If you get to that point, you're probably at a point where you're not going to have agreement on anything.
That's right.
That you just try to find a way to back out and maybe regroup, and like you say, we're at an impasse because there is no agreement to disagree.
And sometimes I will divert them to a different individual. So if I know we have this same issue on something, then I let you speak to my assistant on this particular issue. So that way you can just get a different tone, you can get a different thing, someone who doesn't have a history with you. And maybe you guys can come to a different solution. Maybe it was just us, maybe it's just me. Go ahead.
Well, I think that's when the empathy comes in hand, because to me, when I've had conflict like that and I have said, you know, we don't agree on this, it's maybe not a subject we need to discuss because we're not gonna resolve anything, and it keeps pushing, and I can just say, you know, because of their background, because of what they've been through, I can see why they feel this way and why it's hard for them to let go of that topic, maybe.
Absolutely.
So to maintain your relationship, to me, that sometimes helps to have that empathy.
It does, yes ma'am.
Have you ever had to use Grey Rock method as in business?
Tell me about that.
Grey Rocking, where you give minimal feedback. Like you literally a Grey Rock. They cannot get an emotional response from you. They cannot insight.
So I consider that the fog is what I call that.
Okay.
So the fog is a strategy I use. It's basically where you absorb everything someone says without letting it actually stick to you. Right? So it's like a fog. You throw things through it. It just goes through it. It doesn't stick to anything, but it always looks like it does. Right? 'Cause it's so thick. So when they say, I get on the phone, they say, oh my God, I'm so frustrated with you. I'm like, you are so frustrated with me. Yeah, absolutely. And I disagree. I don't take ownership for that. I don't take ownership for it, but I just agree with them saying, I'm so mad right now, you are so mad. Yeah, I hear that. And I just move on. Like, you were super late to this. I was late. So how can, and I just move on. Like, and after a while, when there's no feedback to it, it just diffuses it because they're not getting anything, you know? You know, I feel like you're not hearing me. I hear that. You feel that I'm not hearing you. I'm looking forward to this conversation so that I can hear everything that you have to say. Everything they say, I just agree with. I don't say you're absolutely right. Well, I hear, yeah, I hear that you don't feel that I'm listening to you. I agree, I was late on that call. How can I help you with blah, 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 let's move forward with this. Oh, you are so frustrated, I can hear that. I'm sorry, you are so angry, I can hear that. This business is no good, you do feel like this business is no good, understandably. And then I just move on. It doesn't, no skin off my nose, yeah.
Well, to help the people in this room with the phrase of agree to disagree, well, for everyone, we should probably work on our perspectives. If we could relay our perspectives well enough, people will grasp onto it and, hear you out. So the perspective is really what matters when it comes to things like these.
It really is, and one of the things that helps with children is called co-regulation. It's where your calm informs their calm, right? We still do this as adults, right? We all still are co-regulated. So Mother Emma is super emotional, something's happened, somebody comes up to her and hugs her, and she begins to calm. That's co-regulation. Their calm has informed her calm, right? We can do this with other people all the time, but you can't do it if you have no calm, right? They can only pull from what you have, not what you aspire to have, not what you wish to have, not what you hope to have, what you actually have in that exact moment. It's like a bucket, and they're borrowing from you, their bucket, to fill their bucket, and at some point you guys will be equal, right? And so this is how I can have people on the phone who started off screaming and hollering and cussing, and by the time we get done, they're laughing, they want to take you out for dinner. I'm absolutely not going out to dinner with you. Like, absolutely not. You're so crazy. But as far as they're concerned, we've like totally become like BFFs and like all is well in the world. And I hang up thinking, listen at that ratchetness. Like, that was a mess of a conversation. But as far as they're concerned, all is well with the world. I've talked people off ledges over and over again emotionally because I have plenty of comfort. You don't have enough to get me out of my bucket of calm. Like, there's not enough you can do to rip me out of that because that's a place I'm firmly planted in, right? And so when you come into conversations in that way, you bring that piece with you, and they can either align with it or they won't. And you say, hey, if someone's cussing, hey, it looks like you're talking in a way that doesn't sound like we're gonna actually have a productive conversation. I can't hear you, and by the tone of your voice, I can tell that you're not listening to me. So how about we get off this phone, and if you would like to talk to me at a time when you can both talk and listen, we can schedule a time for us to talk later.
Wow.
Yeah? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have like a list of books or resources to learn how to do that?
Yeah.
Like everything you're talking about. Like,
Yeah,
how do you
there's so
learn
many
this?
out there. There's, I think negotiation books are good, like Split the Difference. Radical Compassionate Candor is good. There's lots of books like that. But really, I think when you get control over yourself, you can manage all these things and undo the things that you learned once about conflict and about trouble and about mismanagement of emotion. When you undo those things, you'll find that you're quite able to do most of the stuff pretty naturally. Once we undo the views that we have around conflict. Here's some strategies for you. One is called the SPI. So this is when you just need to articulate something, your unmet need, right? So this is, you say it like this. When you say the situation happened, this behavior, and this behavior happened, it blank, 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 impacted, right? So when you walked into the room and did not acknowledge me, it made me feel inadequate, right? Or when you called me yelling, it made me feel disrespected, right? So when you say it like this, you put it you-centric on your behaviors and how it felt for you and what you experienced and how you feel about it versus what they intended and what they meant. And so it kind of diffuses some of that defensiveness because you're just talking about it from your point of view. So example, the person I work with is very moody. When she sees me for the first time in the morning or is beside me grabbing coffee, she never speaks or acknowledges me. It makes me feel so uncomfortable. So SBI would be when you pass me in the morning and say, don't speak to me or acknowledge my presence, it makes me feel insecure or inadequate or insufficient or insignificant, right? The more specific the adjective at the end, the better. Online, you can find this thing called an emotion wheel. I forgot to put it in my presentation. It's a big wheel. It starts off with like happy, sad, angry, things like that, and then it varies out to more specific descriptors. I encourage you to get that, to have it on your phone. I encourage you to use it with your children, nieces, your nephews, people that you use. So many times we're using these big labels for things that have more specific things, and the more specific you are, the closer you get to the actual emotion, the faster you diffuse it. So if someone says you're so mad, but you're not mad, you're actually frustrated, you don't feel seen because they didn't hit the nail on the head. You're not mad, you're frustrated. Or maybe you're just exhausted with them, right? You're not mad. And when they do that, it immediately makes you feel defensive because they did not properly articulate the emotion that you were feeling. So then you feel the need to tell them the emotion that you're actually feeling, right? When you say it more definitively, and the more specific you are, the faster it helps that person feel seen, or the faster it makes you feel seen, and the faster it diffuses the situation, okay? Now, and this is how you articulate it. We were talking about compassionate candor, right? And challenging directly. This is just you acknowledging the unmet need. After that, you're probably going to end up in a conversation, right? And when you end up in a conversation, you're going to have to listen. And so you should learn some active listening. Listening, if you are thinking of what you're about to say while someone is talking, you are not listening. Okay? You should be fully listening to what they're saying. After they said what they've said, you should think about what they've said, and then you should respond. If your response is in your mind while they're talking, you are not listening. So be attentive. Look at their body language. Ask open-ended questions. When you didn't call me back after I called you 7 times, it made me feel like this relationship was not important to you. So you say, is this the first time that that's happened? Do you find that I do that often? Do you feel like this is something I do often to you? Or is this the first time that this has happened? Because I really want to be aware. You start asking those type of questions and probing questions. You request clarification. You paraphrase. What I hear is that, I made you feel like this wasn't very important because you've called me a lot over the last 2 days and I haven't returned your call. And then you empathize. You reflect the feelings. I can understand how that would make you feel frustrated and small and like you weren't important in my life. And then you summarize. And then if there is a response or a conclusion or a resolution, then you give that. It's always going to be my goal to get back. There are a series of times when I can't, but if you've called me more than 3 times, I'm going to do my best, even if it's just to shoot you a text message to say, saw your message, can't talk now, we'll touch base later. I will do that so that you don't feel that way because your feelings are very important to me, and you as a person matter to me, right?
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, you came to the slide, tough conversation. That you're speaking really, really direct, and as a species of being, we don't speak that direct. Mm-hmm. We tend to, gloss it over or, polish it up. Mm-hmm. We don't speak that direct.
Yeah, but you get to the same result. If you felt like if you lost money every time you talked over a certain length of time, you would get to the point faster.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're not getting paid by the minute and by the word. The faster you do something, it's just like children. It's easier to retain information when someone says, for example, I asked my son, did you do your homework? Well, I had an assignment that was due on Tuesday, and I looked at that one, but the teacher said blah, 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 and he goes into this 7-minute diatribe, right? And then when he gets done, I was like, did you do your homework? I was like, the better way to respond to that is to answer my question. And then if you want to give me your explanation, why? Because it's so disrespectful. Mm-hmm. I took the time to ask you a question. Instead of answering my question, you gave me what you wanted to give me instead. And oftentimes, that's what we're doing. And that's why our conversations are not as direct, because we want to lay all this groundwork before we address the thing that we've been asked to address. Mm-hmm. And if you realize that that's not actually respectful to that person, they can handle a lot more than we realize they can. And if anything, we're perpetuating a species of very passive, weak, and incompetent individuals. And they will never grow up if you, the person that they have a relationship with and that knows them and that cares for them, doesn't help them to rise to the occasion. Yes, ma'am. Did you raise your hand? Oh, no, okay. Rise to that occasion. Now, you can have empathy in the way you deal with conflict. When I have to have a critical conversation with someone and I'm about to tell them they did a really horrible job at their job, I do have empathy for them. And so I will call and be like, hey, how's your day going today? Are you having a good day? Well, I have some critical feedback for you. Is this going to be a good time for you, or would you like to reschedule this for some time tomorrow? That's me showing them empathy to let them know that I realize today may not be the day for you. Maybe you've had a really hard day. Maybe you hit your limit. And so we're still gonna have this conversation. But you can choose to have it now, or you can choose to have it later. It gives them buy into the conversation. They say, oh no, I'm good to have it now. I said, well, great. So the client said that you did a really horrible job. You were late. Is that true? Were you late? And we started in on it. And at that point, you said we could have this conversation, so now we're having this conversation, right? But it gives them ownership, it gives them choice, it gives them autonomy, it lets them know that I see them as a human, right? There are ways to go about being direct and being empathetic. And it doesn't, this mindset, again, something we have to uncouple, that being direct or assertive is not being kind, is not true.
Right.
Being passive and lying to people, and beating around the bush is like the most horrible form of narcissism to me, because you are avoiding something that will make you uncomfortable. You don't want to make yourself uncomfortable, so you avoid something that could better the relationship or could help that person because you don't want to be put in an uncomfortable position. Your care for that person, whether it's employee, business owner, consumer, should be enough that it would cause you to get out of that zone. And really, nervousness comes from novelty. So the more you do this, the less uncomfortable you will feel. The whole reason you are uncomfortable with this is because you don't do it enough. And so if you did it more often, and on low temperature things. So for example, you're in Walmart, you're in the line, and someone comes like right behind you. Like you can feel their breath in the back of their neck and stuff. When they move, they touch you. And you ignore your emotions because you in yourself, you feel like, why are they this close to me? This makes me feel really uncomfortable. I would feel better if they backed up. But instead, you hold it in because why? You don't want to rock a boat, a Walmart boat, right? So you ignore your feelings and let them be in a space that doesn't make you feel comfortable. This is a low temperature exchange. You turn around and be like, hey, how are you doing there? Do you mind backing up just a little bit? I can kind of feel you breathing on me, and when you move, you're hitting me. I know you don't mean to, but if you could just back up just a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Those are low temperature exchanges that you can practice honoring your own emotions and handling what would be considered as conflict. Now, after you've given the statement, you may be engaged in a conversation, right? And then you're gonna need to know how to handle that conversation if it goes past your assertive statement. And so here's a video on that.
Stressful conversations are unavoidable in life, and in business, they can run the gamut from having to fire somebody, which is like the most gut-wrenching thing you will ever have to do, or admitting failure, that you really blew it, or another thing that you might have to do is deal with a customer who's really upset.
How about a smoothie? What's in that?
Smoothie's a juice drink. We want coffee.
And I think it's very natural to want to avoid those conversations like the plague. But especially in business, there's an epidemic right now of people that are unwilling to have uncomfortable conversations. Harvard Business School just did a study and they found that 67% of managers are uncomfortable talking to the people they manage. And this gets me to what I want to talk to you today. It is the secret to how to have a difficult conversation. Because what's critical is learning the skill of untangling your emotions from the subject matter and being able to go face to face with anybody and have that difficult conversation. There are 4 techniques that I use whenever I'm going to have a difficult conversation that help me stay focused on what I need to talk about instead of getting hijacked by my emotions. Number 1, I always start the conversation by acknowledging my responsibility in the mess that we have to talk about. Whether it's the fact that I've avoided dealing with this sooner, or whether there's something that I've done that's contributed to the situation, I acknowledge it right up front. And one of the reasons why that's so important is because by accepting some responsibility, you're diffusing the other person's emotion, you're also honoring them a little bit, and it sets a much more level playing field for when you get into the difficult things that you need to talk about. It's also going to put the person that you're speaking to a little at ease. It's So they're going to be able to listen. Number two, you want to have a goal. Never go into a difficult conversation without an outcome defined before you go into it. The reason why the outcome is so important is because this conversation is going to be a roller coaster. The person that you're talking to might get upset. You yourself might feel emotional at some point, whether you're angry or you're triggered or you get sad. And so when you ride the roller coaster of emotion, the thing that is going to stabilize your thoughts is the outcome that you're causing. You're having this conversation because you're committed to making the relationship better. You're having this conversation because this isn't working. And so we need to end it powerfully. You're having this conversation because you want to give somebody some feedback that's not so fun to tell them, but you're giving it to them because you're committed to their success, okay? So that goal, you feel yourself getting emotional, you come back to it, you come back to it, you come back to it. Third thing you're going to do a lot in this conversation, you're going to listen and you're going to validate. So you're going to say what you need to say, and then the other person's going to react. And instead of arguing or debating, I want you to listen and I want you to validate what the person is saying. It may sound counterintuitive, but honestly, one of the most powerful things you can do in any conversation, whether you're fighting with your kids over curfew, or you're arguing with somebody at work over workloads, whatever it may be, is hear where the person's at.
Listen to me, listen to me.
The moment you say, wow, that must be really tough, what you're dealing with, or oh, I totally get why you now were avoiding me. If I felt the way that you felt, I'd probably do the same thing. The second you validate somebody, they immediately stop defending themselves. It's unbelievable, actually. Unbelievable. You've got to try it. Validate, validate, validate. It is the most powerful thing. And then once, of course, they feel validated that you've heard them, now they can listen. And that's when you come back to the final thing, which is you're going to restate always the outcome. Keep coming back to it. Keep coming back to it. And yeah, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have all kinds of emotions come up because you've been avoiding this conversation. But I'm telling you right now, if you find the confidence and the courage to go and to start this thing, acknowledge your responsibility, have an outcome in mind, validate the other person, validate, 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 and keep talking till you hit that outcome, you're going to be really, really amazed at how much easier these things become. And if you want to make it even easier on yourself, rehearse it with another friend first, somebody that's not involved in the situation. Because again, difficult conversations comes down to one important thing: the ability for you to separate your emotion about doing it from the things you actually need to talk about and the outcome that you want to cause.
All right. So I have found this to be very beneficial. We do this all the time. We teach nannies to do this. So say their employer is coming home late all the time. They go in, they say, hi, I'd really love to have a conversation with you to see how we can structure the schedule so that you get what you need from me, but that I get to leave at the times that are designated to leave. I really want to make sure that your needs are met, right? Then they go into these things. Sorry that I haven't had time to talk to you before. I haven't brought it up before. It seems like you've been really busy, but I know I could have brought this up sooner. And then they just keep going, keep going, keep going. They listen, they validate, and every time it gets heightened. I understand that sounds really frustrating. I know you can't decide when your work lets you off late. I just really want to see how we can get to a point where your needs are met and I can leave on time. You just keep restating that thesis, right? You keep restating it. I just really want to make sure that we can get to a page where your needs are met and I can know what time I'm leaving. It's really important that I know what to expect. So how can we get to that? And continuing to state that puts you back to a mutual path, right? This is where this whole conversation is to get back to this goal. So when it gets off on tangents, you bring it back. I hear that sounds like that may be another conversation we can have, but today I'd really like to see how we can make sure that your needs are met while I have a pretty steady schedule where I can know when I'm getting off of work and I can get off work on time, right? And so being able to do these things, I have found to be really, really successful. So the SBI is for when you make the statement, you get engaged into a conversation, and then you can use Rolo, right? To help you navigate that difficult conversation. Any questions on that? Sure. All right. For those who prefer scripts, here's some. When I'm unable to leave on time, it makes me feel disrespected. These are, I realize I should have discussed this with you sooner. I'm hoping we can brainstorm strategies to improve scheduling. I'd love your insight, right? Say you need clarity. They're saying things and you want to clarify for clarity, blah, blah, blah. How would you like me to handle blah, blah, blah? could you tell me more about blah, blah, blah? Let me make sure I have this straight. I didn't quite follow what you said about that. Could you clarify? And then reinforcing a boundary. Previously, we had agreed that X, Y, and Z. Is this still accurate? I know you have a lot on your plate. While I am not best suited for X, Y, and Z, would you like to try, for me to try to source this to someone else to assist you with this? Right? Some ways that we can get into these conversations, still have professional empathy for them while respecting our own boundaries. Any questions? All right, so we want to lead with integrity, communicate effectively, and model professionalism. And if you don't have any questions, then that's all we have for today. Thank you for your time.
I do want to say,
Yes.
the world needs trillions of you.
Thank you so much.